Hey there, welcome to Craxoid. If you are someone who has used a custom ROM or recovery on your Android device, you might have come across the backup or wipe partition option. And if you are wondering what those partitions are, don't worry, we have got you covered. In this video, we'll be explaining all the different partitions you might find in a custom recovery backup option. And we'll be doing it in a way that's easy to understand. From the boot partition to the persist partition, we'll break down all the complicated terms into simpler explanations. So let's dive into the video. As you can see, I have installed Orange Fox custom recovery on my phone, but the partitions we'll be discussing are almost the same on any custom recovery such as TWRP or any other. In this video, I'll be showing you how to access these partitions and explaining what each one does in a simple, easy to understand way. So let's jump right into the backup option and tap on create new backup. As you can see, we have a long list of partitions such as boot, cache, dtbo, system image, and many more. These partitions are like different containers that hold various types of data on your Android device. Think of it like a house with different rooms for different purposes. Similarly, your device has different partitions for different types of data. But what do they all mean? Well, let's break it down in simple terms. Boot partition. Let's start with the boot partition. This partition contains the kernel, which is the core of the operating system. Think of the kernel as the bridge between the hardware and software on your device. Whenever you turn on your phone or tablet, the kernel is the first thing that's loaded into memory. This boot partition is mainly responsible for starting off the device. For example, when you turn on your Android device, the boot partition is what starts up the device and loads the operating system. This is like the ignition in your car. It's what starts everything up and gets things moving. dtbo partition. Next up is the dtbo partition. This partition contains device tree information that helps the device communicate with its hardware components on your device, such as the touchscreen, camera, and Wi-Fi. It's like a blueprint that tells your device how to use its hardware. The dtbo partition is responsible for managing and updating the device tree, which contains information about the hardware components of your device. When you update your device or install a new custom ROM, the device tree needs to be updated to ensure that everything is working properly. The dtbo partition is responsible for handling these updates and ensuring that your device is running smoothly. For example, the dtbo partition helps the device recognize and communicate with the specific hardware components it has, such as the camera or touchscreen. Just think of this like the translator between your phone's hardware and software. It makes sure they can understand each other and work together properly. Cache partition. The cache partition is like a storage area where your device stores frequently used data like app data and websites you visit often. Whenever you open an app or visit a website, your device stores it in this partition so that it can be quickly accessed the next time you use it. But if your device keeps too much data in the cache partition, it can slow down. So it's a good idea to clean it out sometimes to free up space and make your device faster again. Cleaning the cache partition can also help if you are having problems with an app because it removes old data that might be causing problems. So if you want to make your device run better, try clearing the cache partition every once in a while. This is like your phone's short-term memory. It stores things your phone uses frequently, so it doesn't have to look them up every time. Recovery partition. The recovery partition is where your device recovery software is stored. This partition contains the software used to restore the device to its original state in case of issues or errors. For example, if your device has an issue that prevents it from starting up properly, you can use the recovery partition to restore it to its original state. In simple terms, the recovery partition is a small partition that contains a recovery image that can be used to restore or update the device. This is like a spare tire in your car. If something goes wrong, you can use it to get your phone back on track. Vendor image. The vendor image partition is like a special storage area on your device that contains firmware, software, and drivers made specifically for your device hardware. This software helps your device work with things like the camera, fingerprint sensor, and other parts. Different devices might have different software in their vendor image partition depending on who made them and what parts they have. But all devices have a vendor image partition to help them work with their hardware. In simple language, you can also consider this like a special tool in your toolbox that you only use for specific jobs. It has the software necessary for your phone to use specific hardware components. System image. The system image partition is like the main storage area on your device where the core Android operating system files are kept. These files make up things like the user interface, system apps, and the setting apps. When you install a new custom ROM, the files in the system image partition are replaced with the new ones from the ROM. It's like swapping out the old operating system for a new and improved one. For example, the system image partition contains the files that make the Android operating system work, such as the setting app and the app store. In simple terms, the system image partition is like the most important part of your phone. It's where all the stuff that makes your phone work is stored. If this part is not working, then your whole phone won't work right. Data partition. The data partition is where your device stores all your personal data such as app data, contacts, messages, and media files. This partition is also encrypted for security purposes. For example, the data partition may contain your text messages, photos you have taken, and app data such as your saved game progress. In simple terms, the data partition is like a storage unit for your phone. It's where you keep all your personal stuff like your contacts, messages, photos, and app data. If you lose this partition, you lose all your important stuffs. Metadata partition. Metadata is data that provides information about other data. In the case of Android devices, the metadata partition contains information about the layout and configuration of the partitions on your device. It's like a map that tells your device where each partition is located and how it's being used. In simple terms, this partition stores information about the data on the device such as file names and locations. For example, the metadata partition may contain information about the files on your device such as the name of your photos and where they are stored. For easy reminder, you can also consider metadata as the index in a book. It keeps track of where everything is stored on your phone so it can find it quickly. And still, if you did not understand, then think like metadata is like a map that tells your phone where everything is located and how it's being used. Just like a map helps you find your way around a city, metadata helps your phone find and use its different parts and functions. Metadata image. On some other phones, you may also come across a partition called metadata image, and this partition is like a folder on your Android phone where the firmware for certain hardware components like your fingerprint scanner or Bluetooth module is stored. Imagine your Android phone has a fingerprint scanner. The fingerprint scanner has its own firmware, which is the software that tells the scanner how to function. This firmware is stored on a separate partition on your phone called metadata image. So if you were to back up the metadata image partition, you would be backing up the firmware for your fingerprint scanner. This firmware is important because it allows your scanner to work properly. Internal storage partition. The internal storage partition is where your device stores all your personal files such as photos, music, and videos. It's like the hard drive on a computer. For example, the internal storage partition may contain your music, songs, videos you have downloaded, and documents you have saved. It's basically the internal storage of your phone, so I don't think I may need to explain this partition in detail, but feel free to comment if you get confused in any of those partitions. MODEM partition. The MODEM partition contains the firmware that is used to control your device cellular connectivity. It's responsible for things like connecting to the internet, sending and receiving text messages, and making phone calls. For example, the MODEM partition contains the software necessary to make phone calls and send text messages. Simple. Understand this as the MODEM partition is like the brain that controls your phone's ability to make calls, send messages, and use the internet. It's a small piece of software that helps your phone connect to the cellular network and communicate with other devices. And still, if you are finding it difficult to understand, let me simplify it to you. Think of the modern partition as the traffic controller for your phone's cellular connection. Just like how a traffic controller manages the flow of cars on the road, the modern partition manages the flow of data between your phone and the cellular network. It ensures that your phone is properly connected to the network and can send and receive data smoothly, such as making phone calls and accessing the internet. EFS partition. Finally, we have the EFS partition. The EFS, standing for Encrypting File System Partition, is a special partition that stores important device-specific information such as the IMEI number, MAC address, and other unique identifiers. It's like a lockbox that contains the keys to your device identity. If this partition gets corrupted or lost, your device may not be able to connect to the internet or make phone calls. In simple terms, you can consider this EFS like a digital ID card. It contains important device-specific information such as the device IMEI number and identifies it uniquely. Simply think of the EFS partition like a safe deposit box at a bank, where you store important documents and valuable items for safekeeping. PERSIST partition. This partition is a storage area on an Android device that stores persistent system settings and app preferences. These settings are stored even if the device is rebooted or turned off. It's like a notebook that you use to jot down every important notes that you want to keep. For example, if you change the screen timeout duration or adjust the volume levels, these settings will be stored in the PERSIST partition. Additionally, if you customize the setting for an app, such as changing the notification settings for a messaging app or storing Wi-Fi passwords, this setting will also be stored in the PERSIST partition. So the next time you open the app, your customized settings will still be there. In summary, the PERSIST partition is where your device stores important system settings and app preferences, including Wi-Fi password, so that they are not lost when the device is turned off or restarted. While EFS and PERSIST partition are different partitions on an Android device that serve different purposes, they are both essential for the proper functioning of the device. In summary, EFS is a critical partition that stores device-specific information, while the PERSIST partition is responsible for storing system settings and configuration data that are persistent across reboots. PERSIST image. And on some other custom recovery, you may also find PERSIST image partition. And this partition is used to store firmware images for certain hardware components such as the touchscreen or camera. For example, imagine your Android phone has a camera. The camera has its own firmware, which is the software that tells the camera how to function. This firmware is stored on a separate partition on your phone called PERSIST image. So if you were to back up the PERSIST image partition, you would be backing up the firmware for your camera. This firmware is important because it allows your camera to work properly. However, if you were to lose this partition or the firmware became corrupted, your camera might not work as expected or might not work at all. This partition is not critical to the functioning of your device, and it's generally not necessary to back it up during the backup process. However, it's worth noting that the importance of this partition may vary depending on the specific device and the custom recovery you are using. In general, it's recommended to back up all available partitions to ensure that you have a complete backup of your device in case of any issues. vbmeta. Basically, vbmeta or verified boot meta is a security partition on an Android device that contains information about the device verified boot process. This helps to ensure that the device is running a trusted version of the operating system and that it has not been tampered with. For example, if someone attempts to modify the boot or recovery image on a device, the cryptographic signature in the vbmeta partition will not match the modified image. This will cause the device to fail the verification process and refuse to boot. If the vbmeta partition detects any changes to the boot image or partitions, it will prevent the device from booting up. This is to prevent any potential security threats or malicious software from taking over the device. So the vbmeta partition is an important component of the device security system that ensures that the device boots up securely and only allows trusted software to run. When you create a backup of your Android device using custom recovery, the vbmeta partition is included to ensure that the backup is trustworthy and can be restored without any issues. For example, let's say you download an app from the Google Play Store. Before installing the app, your device checks its signature in the vbmeta partition to ensure that it has not been tampered with or modified in any way. If the signature matches, then the app can be safely installed and used on your device. Similarly, when you install a custom ROM or flash a firmware update, your device checks the digital signature in the vbmeta partition to make sure that the software is authentic and has not been tampered with. If the signature does not match, then the installation process will fail and your device will not be able to use the new software. Simply think of the vbmeta partition as a security guard that checks the ID of anyone who enters a building. vbmeta system partition. When you buy a new Android phone, it comes with a pre-installed software that ensures the phone works properly. This software includes a bootloader which is responsible for verifying that the operating system is genuine and has not been tampered with. The vbmeta system partition contains a digital signature that verifies the integrity of the bootloader and the operating system. This signature is checked during the boot process to ensure that the software is legitimate and hasn't been modified. Think of it like a seal on a bottle of medicine. The seal ensures that the medicine inside is safe and hasn't been tampered with. Similarly, the digital signature in the vbmeta system partition ensures that the system software on your phone is safe and has not been modified in any way. If someone tries to modify the bootloader of the operating system, the digital signature in the vbmeta system partition will no longer match and the phone will not boot up properly. This helps prevent unauthorized modifications and keeps your phone secure. So while the vbmeta partition is responsible for verifying the integrity of various partitions on the device, the vbmeta system partition contains information about the system partition specifically. You may be feeling it a little complicated, so now listen carefully to this example in order to understand it better. Let's say you have an Android device that came with pre-installed operating system from the manufacturer. This operating system is signed and verified by the manufacturer, which means it is considered trustworthy by the device bootloader. However, let's say you want to install a custom ROM on your device. This custom ROM is not signed by the manufacturer, which means it is considered untrustworthy by the device bootloader. In order to install the custom ROM, you will need to unlock the device bootloader, which allows you to modify the system files. However, unlocking the bootloader also disables the signature verification process, which means that the bootloader won't be able to verify the authenticity of the operating system on the device. This is where the vbmeta system partition comes in. It contains a small portion of the verified boot process that is used to verify the authenticity of the operating system during the boot process. When you unlock the bootloader, the verified boot process is disabled for the entire system except for the vbmeta system partition. This means that even if you install an untrusted custom ROM, the bootloader will still be able to verify the authenticity of the vbmeta system partition, which is trusted and signed by the manufacturer. In summary, the vbmeta system partition is a small partition that contains a portion of the verified boot process, which is used to verify the authenticity of the operating system during the boot process, even when the bootloader is unlocked. The cost image partition. The cost image partition on a backup section in a custom ROM refers to a partition on an Android device that contains customer-specific data, such as configuration files, software updates, and other customization made by the device manufacturer or mobile carrier. For example, if a mobile carrier wants to include specific apps on their device, they can add those apps to the cost image partition. Or if the device manufacturer wants to include some custom settings, they can add those settings to the cost image partition. The cost image partition is usually separate from the system partition, which contains the core operating system files. It is also different from the user data partition, which stores user data such as photos, videos, and documents. When creating a backup of a custom ROM, it's important to include that cost image partition to ensure that all the customization made by the manufacturer or mobile carrier are also backed up. Imagine you have a smartphone and you have customized it to your liking by installing certain apps. changing settings and adding files. The cast image partition is where all of these customizations are stored. So if you were to take a backup of your smartphone using a custom recovery, the cast image partition would be included in that backup. For instance, let's say you installed a custom launcher and customized the home screen layout with specific icons and widgets. All of these customizations would be stored in the cast image partition. If you ever need to restore your smartphone to its previous state, you would need to restore the cast image partition along with the other partitions in order to bring back all of your customizations. Firmware image partition. The firmware image partition is a storage area on an Android device that contains firmware files for various hardware components such as the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, modem, camera, touchscreen, etc. These firmware files are used by the phone software to communicate with these components. Firmware is a type of software that is embedded in hardware and it provides low-level control over the device hardware components. When you take a backup of the firmware image partition using a custom recovery on your Android phone, you are essentially creating a copy of the firmware files that are currently installed on your device. This can be useful if you need to restore your device to its original state or if you want to install a custom firmware that is designed specifically for your device. For example, let's say you want to install a custom firmware that includes some new features and improvements for your device camera. The firmware image partition contains the firmware files for the camera. So by backing up this partition, you can create a copy of the original firmware files in case something goes wrong during the installation process. In summary, the firmware image partition is a storage area on an Android device that contains firmware files for various hardware components. Backing up this partition can be useful for restoring your device to its original state or for installing custom firmware that is tailored to your device. Super partition. Imagine that your Android phone has a storage space of 32 GB and it's divided into different partitions like system, user data, cache and others. However, managing these partitions can be complicated, especially when it comes to updating the system or installing a new ROM. To solve this problem, the concept of the super partition was introduced. The super partition is essentially a virtual partition that combines multiple partitions into a single partition. It acts as a container that holds all the other partitions and the file system is laid on top of it. So instead of managing each partition separately, the super partition makes it easier to manage the entire system. For example, when you update the system or install a new ROM, you don't have to worry about managing multiple partitions separately. The update or ROM package can be flashed to the super partition, which then distributes it to the appropriate partitions. Think of the super partition as a big container that holds smaller containers, just like a lunchbox has a different compartments to hold different types of food. The super partition holds different partitions that make up the entire Android system. Thank you for watching this video where we discussed each and every partition available on the backup section of custom recovery on Android phones. I hope you found it helpful in understanding the different partitions and their purposes. Creating this video took a lot of time and effort to ensure that the explanation and examples were simplified and easy to understand. If you found this video informative and helpful, please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe to our Craxoid channel for more informative videos like this. Also, if you have any questions or suggestions for future videos, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Thank you again for watching and we'll see you in my next video. Bye!